So the other day, my husband and I got asked a pretty interesting question that's been rattling through my mind for the past few days. To give some context, my husband's a clinical counselor, and I'm currently finishing up my majors to become a licensed counselor here in Montana as well. And then the question was, when you guys are arguing, do you ever feel like the other person is trying to therapize you? So our initial response was no. Like, we've worked on our communication patterns with one another to try and approach conflict or approach disagreement by empathizing with the other person and really trying to understand where the other person is coming from, as an effort to like attune and see the world through their eyes. So with that, again, we didn't start our relationship this way, but at this point, it's a lot more of like asking questions or using I feel statements. And, an example of an I feel statement is, I felt hurt when this came up or when you did this. And so rather than accusing the other person of being something or doing something, you're sharing that this I felt a certain way when you did this action or this behavior came up. And that really helps us recognize, like, okay, this is my response to this situation. And then the other person gets to also observe that even if they had a different intention in their behavior, clearly it was received differently. And so this is where that attunement really starts to take place, is when you can talk about that kind of stuff freely. Or again, questions was the other tactic that we kind of used. Like, well, do you think that this would be okay? Or what are your thoughts on this? Or what was your intention with this situation or this action? So that's usually how we approach more difficult conversations. If there's like a really intense disagreement or differing view, we use more of those I feel statements. If it's a little softer of a situation and easier to emotionally regulate and empathize more quickly, then you're going to see more of those question type interactions. But as I've been thinking about this, there's also a lot of layers to that. So to therapize someone, we just kind of assume it would be an individual spouting or sharing research or information which may guide an opinion or a perspective. And when you think about what a therapist does, usually they're there to be a soundboard for you. And so maybe they're giving you tools or extra information and hopefully contributing to a different perspective or how you might perceive something you're experiencing. Or they're just there to listen, and they're just there to be an emotional support for you and lend you an ear as you're processing something emotionally. So that's really like a healthy, therapist-client relationship in my eyes, in my personal perspective. But this question of, okay, well, do you ever feel like the other person's trying to therapize you? Which I have been told through other people that I've made certain individuals feel that way. And when I reflect on the dynamic at hand versus the one that I have with my husband, with my husband, we actually research healthy communication patterns together. We research childhood development together. We research, healthy habits of a marriage together. And so we're already like collaborating in a way that gives us similar information sources and similar knowledge base. With others, I don't necessarily have that. And so I tend to be a fixer and a problem solver. And so if someone comes to me, my initial reaction is, oh, I want to help ease this situation for you. And that's not always the best response. And I recognize that. And that's something that is my personal work. But that's where that therapizing, I think, can come from. If that other individual just wants to be heard and listened to rather than be given advice on how to solve something, then I can see how that would be taken as like a therapizing type circumstance. But is that appropriate, for a relationship? And when you're in conflict with an individual, and something is coming up where you maybe really do need to have some crucial conversations, I feel that it could be best to have someone else, at like a professional therapist, who you're using to really vent and process emotionally. Maybe your spouse or that person you're having tension with it's maybe not the best time to sit and try and go through conflict management if you're still processing what you're feeling and what's going on with you. And so it's always beneficial to say in a relationship, I just need a break. Can we regroup and come back to this conversation later today? Or, I feel like I need to talk to my therapist. Can we revisit this in the next few days? So rather than avoiding or stonewalling, which would be complete disconnection, no communication about where someone is when in their emotional regulation process, that would be like stonewalling or avoiding. But actually creating a communication line saying, I need some extra time or I need a break, is extremely healthy and absolutely pivotal to managing conflict in a relationship in a healthful way. So then once you can come back together and you have that processing complete, you have some more ability to emotionally regulate, then there can be that conversation of, I felt this way when this happened. And, that's just the beginning of it though, to start the conversation in that way is awesome. And the other person to be able to receive the conversation, and instead of trying to justify their actions, well, I didn't mean that because of this. Look at these things that I've done and that I've gone through. You might feel that way, but I feel this way because of X, Y, and Z situation. Those are all ways of communicating your feelings are invalid because I didn't mean it. I've already gone through a bunch of different things. Look at what you have done to me. And those are not necessarily helpful conflict management responses. Instead, saying, okay, this person's experience is their reality, whether I resonate with it or not, whether I intended for my actions to be received in that way or not. This is that person's reality. And to voice, I'm sorry that you feel that way. That must be really intense. I'll be mindful of these interactions as we move forward. So you're voicing to that other person, okay, I'm attuning to you. I'm recognizing when I behave in a certain way, it might evoke a certain response in you. And that's attunement. You're understanding that other person's world and how they perceive things. So that can be a really powerful tool to continue the, conversation and say, I really didn't want to hurt you, so I'm going to acknowledge my behaviors, and this is what I was trying to accomplish. I was trying to make our life a little bit more efficient in this way. So how could I do that better? How could I communicate that better? So this is where those questions start to come into play. And it can take a lot to let go of that desire to justify why we do what we do. And I think for me, a part of that is because I don't want other people to be hurt from my actions, and never do I intend to hurt other people. So when they tell me, oh, when you did this, it hurt me, my initial response is usually, well, I didn't mean to hurt you. This is what I meant. We want to remove that pain by sharing knowledge, by sharing information, but that's not how emotions work all the time. And emotions and affect can be soothed the most easily when we just recognize them, when we acknowledge that it's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to feel disconnected from. When you're with someone in a relationship, any type of relationship, whether it's a spouse, a family member, or a friend, when you're with someone who's willing to say, I see how you're feeling, and I'm sorry that you feel that way, and I'll be more receptive. I want to be more receptive to your experience. That's a super, super powerful connective opportunity. Instead of it being you versus me, now the situation becomes us versus this conflict, or us teaming up to observe this challenging conversation or this challenging experience that we're having. And that really changes things. When you're committed in a relationship to make things better and to have healthier patterns, even just saying, I'm committed to making this work, can be a soothing balm when there's a lot of pain or a lot of hurt happening. So with all of that said, take time to voice to people around you, even when you're in a really, really challenging conversation, I'm committed to figuring this out, and recognizing like what went wrong, what came up to cause some of this hurt or disconnection. And once you're there, once you're in that place, there are so many things that can possibly unravel to build a healthy relationship. You can collaborate in that healthy relationship rather than being against each other, and against each other's perspectives about life, which can create a huge, disconnection and lack of attunement ultimately. So I hope that these reflections are something that you can take away into your life, and maybe even reflect on yourself with yourself or with people that you care about or have crucial conversations with. And I hope that it starts to kind of evoke some interesting perspectives and insights for you in your life.